I guess give us the rundown from the start. Full pull entertainment, full pull picks, full pull live. You got this whole full pull tech stack, and it has a sports entertainment media component. What is this for people that don't know? And it's much bigger. When Sterling brought it up, I was like, man, let's get Chase on. This is pretty crazy. So I'm interested to hear from your side.
Yeah, for sure. Well, in a nutshell, it's probably like what ESPN is to mainstream sports, we are to a niche sport. When you look at the media component, covering content, streaming, and now ESPN has ESPN Bet. We have our own real money gaming platform that's all tied together. And I was around the sport of truck and tractor pulling at birth, brought into it, via my grandfather and father, and I have a built-in passion for it. But it's also one of these sports that there's not a lot of awareness around to the outer world, if you want to call it that. But it's interesting because, in that universe, like a lot of things, it has a very large and loyal following that honestly, when you go spectate one of these events, you're like, there's as many people at these events as there are at an NBA or a college basketball game around the country. So this all got started with literally an idea. I'm from Kentucky and don't live far from Churchill Downs and been around horse racing my whole life, like a lot of people from Kentucky. So it was as simple as me with some friends and a whole nother story sitting around saying, why can't we make this sport like horse racing was the idea. And from there kind of set off this interesting and wild journey, as I would call it, that's led to a full-blown media company and a gaming operator. It's not specifically horse racing, but it's similar to horse racing. So the identity and goal of Full Pull Entertainment is obviously to expand the horizons of a sport that has probably been underserved from the awareness standpoint. And 1 year into it, I'd say we're well on our way to succeeding in doing that. But we're just probably at the crawling stage of a marathon run, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and give us what is it exactly? This track they're pulling, how does it work? What do the events look like? Just for people that have no context at all, I've never seen it. I mean, first off, if you are listening, go pop on YouTube and check it out. But Chase, what is this sport
Yeah.
and how is it played? The rules. Give us the basic overview.
Well, it is a motorsport on which when people think motorsports, they think who's the fastest, speed and time. We're all used to F1 or NASCAR racing. The fastest guy wins. In motorsports, generally as a whole, pretty well classified as that. But this sport, speed and time are irrelevant in terms of determining outcomes, and you're literally pulling something. So the word pull, they didn't get very creative when they came up with the name of it because you're pulling something, and it's very simple in terms of just what you're trying to accomplish. But sometimes it takes a little bit of educating or information to lay it out there, because honestly, Andrew, you and I as kids, I'm assuming like myself, with neighbors or cousins or friends, we were being in the backyard, we were racing to see who the fastest was, right? Let's go A to B and see who's fastest. I don't think we're ever challenging our friends to see who can pull something the furthest. So there's a little bit of conceptual understanding you got to have about it, but you're on a 350-foot playing surface. So imagine a football field plus a little more. And there's an object called a pulling sled, which is, pretty marvelous technology, as are the vehicles that are competing. But everyone's hooking up to this pulling sled at 0 feet. And through styles of skill, horsepower, strategies, I mean, it's extremely sophisticated on approaches teams take, but everyone's starting at 0 feet and you're going on this 350-foot playing surface, and whoever can pull this sled the furthest wins, and then the outcomes are determined by furthest to shortest distances. So it sounds very simple, but it doesn't do it justice until you sometimes see these pieces of equipment in person, because it definitely has a wow factor whenever you're, the pure horsepower. I don't know if you've ever been around NHRA drag racing at all, but it's on, FS1 every Sunday. But these funny cars, when you stand beside them, they literally make your face, and your brain shake because there's so much horsepower. Similar type feeling at these pulling events with the pieces of equipment that are pulling the pulling sled. So very simple, but it takes a little bit of understanding. Whoever pulls it the furthest wins.
Yeah, I appreciate the description. And we were talking a little bit before. We both have basketball backgrounds. What were you doing before this, and then how did it really come to be to start building out this full event league tournament media company 4 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. So I coached Division One basketball for 10 years, up until about 4 years ago. Had a very successful tenure in that industry. Coached in four NCAA tournaments, was really on the fast track in the industry, and had great experiences and memories and friendships from basketball that I'll carry on a lifetime. But, like a lot of things during COVID time, a lot of perspective for a lot of people, a lot of industries changed. And I kind of took a step back and had this crazy idea that I was going to make this sport bettable, along with some other, I'm very fortunate. My family has successful business enterprises that I'm involved with now. But, you know, NIL and the transfer ecosystem was kind of coming to the forefront about that time. And not that there's anything wrong with any of it, but I kind of envisioned what was ahead, and kind of just thought to myself, you know what, I'm in a good spot with my career here coaching. I'm going to take a step back, see if I can go make something happen. If I want to get back into coaching, I probably can, and I've had opportunities to get back in. But it's funny, my probably in 19, give or take around that time, one of my coaching colleagues, as I'll call him, he was assistant coaching me, came over to my house on a weekend, and there was a tractor pulling event going on. These events, the busy part of the season takes place from late May to middle September. I want to say it was late August. And he came over to my house, and I had this stream on. My dad was competing in it, and he's kind of like you, Andrew. He's like, "What is this? Explain this. Like, what am I watching? Like, and there's thousands of people in these stands. Like, what is this?" And I took him through his quick tutorial. About probably 30, 40 minutes into it, we were having a couple adult beverages too. 30, 40 minutes into it, he's like, "Dude, this is the most bettable sport I've ever seen in my life, because it is very bettable, because one person goes at a time, there's a break, catch your breath, the next guy goes." He's like, "You can do it over and under, you can do everything. Like, you need to someone needs to make this how you can bet on it." That was the first time the idea was ever put in my brain. I think I'd be, at that time in my life, 5 years ago, probably think I'd be doing what I was doing now. But that was kind of the moment where my antennas were kind of raised, and, went through the year. Then COVID came, and some things, again, you kind of evaluate things differently. And I started some initial, what I call, strikeout research, but it was enough to like make me look further into it. I really was like, I'm going to see if I can make this sport like horse racing. And I took a leap of faith and walked away from my coaching career. And that was 4 years ago. And I have no regrets at all at this point. So that's kind of the Cliff Notes version of how I got here. But it's been a very exciting and rewarding journey. And like I said, we're really just kind of at the beginning of what we think's ahead. So
Very cool. And so the league structure was already established, and then how did you sort of work your way in then to leading the organization?
yeah, so we're not an organization; we're a media company.
Okay,
So
so
I use the illustration of ESPN, what it is to like NFL or NBA. They don't run the leagues or the associations, but they're a media partner, and they obviously have
got it.
partnerships with large mainstream sports. But this sport's been around for 75 years. The National Tractor Pullers Association, the NTPA, is the most historic, long-standing, premier level of competition. They have rule books. It's very sophisticated. Like, we didn't have to go in and change anything about how the
Got it.
sport
So there
operates.
was essentially already events, and then you guys came in and just built the media around it to sort of take it more
Correct.
to the masses. Makes sense.
Correct. And the media component of our business, we launched a free to play, promotional campaign, just to see if people would even gravitate to wanting to do some form of gaming around this. And while doing that, we did a lot of media coverage around our product and the sport itself. There's at least 5 to 6 probably influencers that all they do is cover the sport of pulling, that have millions of followers. So there are people out there that keep up with this, but had some good media partners come in and just kind of add to what we were doing. And by doing that, we did some things that kind of stood out, and we were approached with honestly, would you be interested in getting in streaming? Because at this time, and this was in 2023, streaming existed for this organization, but it was probably, I would say, very underserved, and like not, a huge investment hadn't been made into it. And this sport also wasn't in a place where it could go shop this around to probably a bigger enterprise, because there was just a few things that need to be fixed and changed to kind of make it marketable. So that was brought to us. And then obviously I have no streaming background, nor did anybody that I was affiliated with at the time. But through a few months, we figured out enough partners and people that would work with us. And long story short, we launched a streaming part of our company, in late March. And then the season kicked off and then in May, and literally created an entire streaming operation like nothing else, especially the sport of pulling, but even motorsports in general. We've got some proprietary technology and things we do that we're pretty excited about, from the streaming side of things. So that's how the streaming part of the media company came about. But the existing organization, as I've gone this journey, and there's a lot of sports that are trying to gamify their sports where you can bet and wager on them. There's a lot that they have to fix in terms of rule books and regulation, and make sure things are on the up and up. When you're taking people's cash and making wagers and transactions. But fortunately, this sport needed no assistance in that. It was already set up in its own ecosystem, where it was really like, here's the information, this is what they do, and it's easy to get approved to do some of this stuff in certain states. So that was a nice part about what we're doing. And I also want to mention, Andrew, these events, the primary, as I mentioned, the primary time is in the summertime, but every weekend, all summer, like from all Midwest US, I mean, there's a low attended event is like 5,000 or 6,000. I'd say the average attendees are up around 10,000. And there's a few events that see, one event in August particularly has 60,000 plus attendees. So like the people are there in venue, and I'm sure you're familiar with Better Media, Jake Paul, and those guys.
Joey Levy.
Yeah, Joey Levy. So through some of advisors and people that work internally with Full Pull, in fact, our CFO is on the board of Better. Ironically, we connected with Better, and in the summertime, a brand like Better is looking for content, right? Because their mainstream sports are kind of dead, and showed them about our events, and the event particularly in Ohio with 60,000 people, and they sent some of their influencers, the Handshake Bets guys specifically, to Bowling Green, Ohio, this event in August, a few weeks before the NFL season started, and had an amazing campaign on both sides. I mean, analytics and reach were very significant, and their audience really gravitated to the content of our sport. There's a whole cultural side, from the party scene and camping scene, and like a whole nother story within this universe of truck and tractor pulling that we can get into. But my point is, there's audiences built in, and all it takes is a little bit of information, and you get people interested in it.
Yeah, it's super cool. And from you were mentioning some of the hobbies. Are there any you see common characteristics of fans of pulling? And is it more like racing? Is it NASCAR? Like, where's sort of like the bucket? Like, if you go to find new fans, where's some of the pockets you're going toward?
Yeah. So a lot of what we're doing is, there's a lot of, as I mentioned, there's 5 to 6 influencers with millions of followers. All they do is cover the sport of pulling. So first thing we're trying to do is just try to get all of those fans into one ecosystem for the first time in an organized way. And we're doing that, and it's gone very, very well. Still, I think we're still probably another full year of really getting our arms around the existing pulling audience. And, we've had great partnerships with people in the sport itself, the promoters and the organization itself. And I think, there's a lot of things that are going to really help us in 2026 kind of have our arms fully around that audience. To answer your question, to new audiences, motorsports fans as a whole, I think, they're called, there's a term, gearheads, people that like horsepower and, automotive technology. Like a NASCAR fan, I could see really fitting in well with our fans, particularly these NASCAR fans. And what I mean by that, there's it's a very I don't like nice NASCAR. You can do your research on this, but like it's a very conservative, campgrounds, non-mainstream as it is now. NASCAR, like I don't nobody ever wants to get into politics, but it's a very conservative, type crowd and audience, and I think a lot of those NASCAR type fans are from the '90s or on are still out there. So a lot of it's bringing them into our ecosystem, which we're doing, and some of them already are there. And then, like I said, it's just more of awareness and having the sport where it's easy to watch. It's good to watch. You can never grow. I'm of the belief you can never grow any audience without a good product to show. So our stream, we're pretty proud of how it sells the sport. There's still so much more we can do, but you're not going to convince somebody to go to one of these events without probably laying eyes on it first. So that's one thing we're really working towards. And then as we grow and expand, I go back to how this all started 5 years ago. My friend that was a coaching colleague made the point like this is an extremely bettable sport. It's still extremely bettable sport. And in fact, I would make the argument, and I think those that brought into the sport from the gaming side of things would somewhat agree that there's not a more bettable motorsport in the world than truck and tractor pulling. I know motorsports as a whole is still kind of new to the gaming landscape, and there seems to be sometimes difficulties with racing and speed and time. Especially from a micro betting standpoint. This sport pulling was really built for micro betting. Where when I say micro betting, for those that don't know it, in game or live betting while the action's taking place, and I think as things evolve and we, really fine tune what we're doing, I think people that like to engage and, gamblers or wagers, whatever you want to call them, I think there will be a strong appetite for our sport. And it's just, especially Andrew, as I've said a few times, in the summertime, there's not a lot of mainstream activities. You have pro baseball, and that's pretty well it. And these events primarily take place during the busiest time of the year is during the time when there's not a lot of sport activity going on. So I think there's a ton of potential when you consider all of that and the timing of when the sport takes place.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something you said a little bit earlier, Chase, on the mainstream sports sort of struggling a little bit and these niche emerging pockets rising up. You want to go a little deeper on that, expand of how you're thinking about it. Obviously, us coming from the basketball world, which is one of the most popular sports worldwide, to now pulling.
Yeah. Well, in 2018, everything changed for everyone, right? Gambling and wagering was now approved for the first time. Obviously, there's been black market gambling going on since the beginning of mainstream sports started, but in terms of a group or organization getting behind something before 2018, that was not even thought of because it was not something legal in our country. And since then, obviously, things are evolving, and we all turn on the TV or our cell phones and see the amount of resources that are being spent from large companies that are trying to capture their audiences, to DraftKings, FanDuel, all these guys to get everyone into their ecosystem for the first time. And also what happened in 2018, from a trickle down effect, I think a lot of sports like a truck and tractor pulling, not truck and tractor pulling specific, but it's pretty interesting. Like, well, we need to make our sport bettable. Like I kind of had this idea, there a few years back, but the part that I think is kind of figuring itself out is, that having the idea to do it and honestly building the technology with enough capital is not the hard part. The hard part is a compliance and regulatory piece of it. And, it's not easy to just get that, you can have all the resources in the world, but without the proper approach and regulatory backing, you're not going to get approved to make a new sport, bettable or make gaming approved with that sport. So I think there's a lot of people that want to get in that market and do it, but it's still, the story's still being told on how to do it or a path to do it. And I think our team and people that work with us would probably call themselves millionaires if they had a dollar for every time I said this, but I always say there's no blueprint for what we're doing, and there's not because this is the first time this is being laid out to the world in terms of gamifying a sport and figuring out the right ways to do it, from a marketing standpoint, regulatory and everything. So that's exciting. It also can keep you up late at night because there's really no way to, there's no, there's not really someone to call to say, hey, how did you do that? But we're, building our own technology. We own our gaming platform is ours, which was not something I really thought we were going to end up doing, but we ended up doing, and really, really thankful we did. It was a little more of an investment of a lift and so forth, but owning your own tech and having your own approved regulatory, like regular approvals in states is a significant thing. So right now we're in 19 states, and I'd say by the end of this year we'll be up in, I think it's going to be 6 more, with more to come. So, but we've really took our time and did our due diligence to make sure, specifically a couple of big states that are big for this sport that are not always easy to deal with from a regulatory standpoint. We've really taken our time and taken the proactive approach to making sure our product is compliant and that we're, not going to get a cease and desist letter in the mail like sometimes happens in gaming right now. So yeah, that's the challenge, but I'm excited that we're a part of the challenge, and I'm pretty optimistic about how this can grow the sport of pulling and even, other motorsports, other niche categories with what we've built here.
Yeah, and when you think about what's next, you've built the media side, you've built streaming, you've built picks, you've built all this infrastructure in 4 or 5 years. Is it now just optimizing everything? Do you have other things you want to start building out? Where are you guys in the roadmap tech side of the equation?
Yeah, as I said, I want to, getting into as many states as we can. We didn't go live with the Pix product until late June, call it early July. And
Okay,
we really just wanted to make sure everything worked and functioned well. I'd almost call this entire past year a test in itself, because I'll be the first to tell you, we don't have any gaming technology partners. I myself have never built technology in my life. We have a good team with us now, but we don't have any references to, feel 100% good about this until you go through it. But it's gone really, really well. There's some fine tuning to do, but at the end of the day, we've had almost 5,000 cash deposits and transactions on our platform, which by industry standards is really significant and good. I don't really know what that number means, but I do know we have a sticky audience, and that number continues to kind of grow week by week. Moving ahead, getting into the new states and, figuring out proper marketing strategies, which is something I didn't really probably put a lot of stock into. You can market anything organically, like our stream itself, like just having our stream and our social channels have, crazy engagement. On Facebook, I think we've reached 180 million just on our content we post the past year, which is a number that you can use to your advantage. But when it comes to gaming, as we've learned, there's a lot more red tape you got to go through to be able to organically promote. That's probably the best way to put it. So finding out the proper marketing strategies that really we can get to our audience and captivate them into our ecosystem. And then beyond that, I honestly probably had 20 to 30 different types of niche markets reach out to us directly, like, hey, how can we do this for our sport? Or would you mind talking to us, or so forth? And I've always entertained and communicate with them, but we have to execute what we're doing really, really well. But I think there's a play down the road, maybe even a year from now, where what we've built is easily transferred to other markets and niche sports as well. And I think that's kind of a big play for us potentially, but we got to execute what we have in front of us first.
Yeah, keep the aperture tight. What's website? Where can people, learn about everything you got going on?
Sure.
Tune into events. Where's the best place to get information?
So first, our social channels, as I mentioned, we cover the sport, as a whole, not necessarily the gaming side, but just the exposure around the sport itself. You can find us on all major social channels: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, just Full Pull, under the handle Full Pull app, I think specifically on a couple of the social platforms. And we have an app that's on a mobile app, excuse me, Andrew, a mobile app on iOS and Google Play, Android devices. You just simply search Full Pull, it pops up, and within that app, it's kind of the one-stop shop for our live stream, our picks platform, and then just general schedules and information around the sport of pulling itself. I expect that app to kind of get a facelift this winter. Actually, I don't expect it will get a facelift before next summer, just where it's a little more complimentary. But the part that's kind of a hassle, from a KYC and regulatory standpoint, you kind of have to separate the gaming side from everything else, because you got to know who's engaging, ages, and all that stuff. So, going to try to simplify that a little bit more for consumers. But the Full Pull apps on the iOS, Android devices. Our website is www.fullpull.us. Within there, you can go to our picks platform if you want to go directly to picks, fullpullpicks.com. And then our live stream is Full Pull Live. It's fullpull.live. Full Pull Live is also available on all Roku, Fire Stick streaming devices. Just simply search Full Pull Live. And we're kind of right now, we just wrapped up last weekend an event in California. So the other part that's really exciting I'd like to share is the busy season of sport kind of wraps up the middle of September, which we were a part of, but we had so much momentum and excitement about around what we were doing. There's pulling that goes on pretty well year round outside of middle of November until the first January 1, which is upon us now. But the cool part is we covered events all the way up until last weekend, across the country. We were in California last weekend. Weekend before that, we were in Georgia. Weekend before that, we were in Texas. So it's kind of year-round streaming starting again in January 1 for the sport of pulling, which is nobody's ever done ever before. And again, we're kind of creating our own data and blueprint, but it's pretty exciting to know that we're still growing audience in what's not even the busy time of the year for the sport. So that's how you find us. Full Pull. You Google Full Pull, we pop up. We've kind of got a pretty big brand behind us at this point, so pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's good. And we'll get the links and everything so people can get that easily in the podcast descriptions and et cetera. But yeah, no, Chase, appreciate you coming on. Super cool to see these new sports. And I know they're not new from your standpoint, but new from the wide consumer sports lens start to draw attention. And I find myself now watching and attending things I never thought I would have 10 years ago. So it's
Right.
it's pretty neat trying to build a whole series of these, and
Sure.
glad to have you a part of that series.